What if we could produce an entire podcast with just this one box?
In this episode of Film Builds, we build a pro-level podcast setup that can be taken anywhere in the world. As the world opens up, Matt's off to travel Australia, and I'm hoping to work a bit more internationally. The thing is, we just started a series called Media Offline, where I interview some of the creators and filmmakers who inspire me. Which leaves a pretty big question. How do we continue to produce this while we're both on the road? The idea is to create a modified hard case that we can take on the road, open up, and in less than a minute be set up and ready to record. It needs to be almost as good as our large-scale setup, and to make things harder, I probably need it to run off battery power. So I tasked Matt with translating our full-scale setup into a smaller version.
So this is the full-size podcast setup. We've got two cardioid microphones on these big arms, and they all run through to the Zoom F6 field recorder. On the video side, we've got three cameras. We've got the C200 in the center, and for our second angles, we've got an EOS R and an R5. Obviously, this is a lot of gear to cram into a little box, so we've got to scale it down a little bit.
For audio recording, we'll be fitting two mics, two arms, a sound recorder, and some headphones. And for the video component, we'll be fitting an A9, a phone mount, and a small monitor. That way, we have an audio-only setup for two guests, and can add the top with video when doing a remote interview.
So it's day one of the build, and our first job is going to be mounting these mics into this box. We're going to be fitting everything in this ProLite reloader case, which is great because it's carry-on size and weatherproof, but it is going to give us some unique challenges. The main one being that it is really compact. I'd love to use a spring-loaded arm for our mics, but they tend to be a little bit hard to control when collapsed. They're also quite large, and I couldn't find one that would fit into our box. So instead, we're going to be using these really chonky magic arms. The problem is, these things aren't really made to fit together. Most cases don't come with 1/4-20 attachments. Now we could just screw in a block from the outside that holds our arm, but that's probably going to ruin the weather sealing. So I think we need to 3D print a connection point instead.
One of the reasons we're using this case is it has these utility slots on the side. This way I can design something that fits in and allows mounting. If you're using another brand of case, your best option here is to probably just glue it in using the right kind of plastic weld.
I designed the piece in SolidWorks and did a test print, and it seems to fit nice and snug in the case. As always, if you want to download the print file for free, head over to syrplab.com/education.
We've got the arms sorted, so let's move on to power. We could run everything off their own batteries for sure, but it's a bit of a mission keeping track of 6 of them, making sure they're all charged, and monitoring the levels while you're also doing an interview. By running everything off one hefty battery pack, it should be easier for us to stay on top of this. We ended up going with this pack from ProMate for 2 reasons. Number 1, can you fly with it? Now this one is 20,000 milliamp hours, which is under the limit for flying domestically in New Zealand, and should still be big enough to power our whole setup. Number 2, does it have enough outputs? Now this one has a USB-C as well as 3 USB-A outputs, which should be good enough for all of our equipment for the length of an interview. But to check that, we set it up overnight and left it running. It looks like it lasts at least 4 hours, so we're in the clear.
Next up is the foam. We settled on this high density foam we bought in bulk, and it's pretty similar to what you'd find in a hard case off the shelf. I built a hot wire cutter from ply, nichrome wire, and a power supply, so we can get some clean looking cuts.
For the height of this case, we need 2.5 layers of foam, and then for planning out those individual layers, we're going to use a piece of paper. We're starting from the top of the case, tracing around every object on each layer. We know where everything is going, but we just need to do a little bit of fine tuning to make sure all the cables can fit. With all the paper templates cut out, it's time to transfer it onto the foam using a paint pen.
This idea works perfectly in theory, but once we got to cutting, we realized we just weren't getting clean cuts, no matter who was having a go. So I modified the cutter to have a bearing at the base, letting us use ply templates for more complex shapes. This worked surprisingly well, and we had our foam complete with cable channels in no time.
Our audio setup is sorted in the base, but that still leaves the video component. We want to be able to shoot remote interviews on this rig in case we are also remote, and for that we're going to need a camera and a phone mount. There's really no space left even for a mini tripod, so we're going to have to make something that fits into the lid. The case has these small mounting points on the lid, which should be perfect for us to screw into, so I think we're just going to chuck a piece of MDF in there, and that's going to mean we can place stuff exactly where we want to, just with a bolt. I measured everything out for our ball head and some utility cheese plates and pre-drilled the holes. After a coat of matte black paint, this was looking great and ready for mounting. If you're doing this in a lighter case, make sure the combined weight of these items won't cause your lid to close automatically. The last step was to cut the foam that came with the case just to fit around our camera and cheese plates.
With everything together, it was time to hit the road and put it to test out in the wild. So, guess it worked, eh?
Yeah.
So I would say it's a success. It made it here in one piece, everything's running off the battery well, and it wasn't too hard to set up.
Yeah, I think it turned out real well. The foam cutting came out awesome. And if I was to change anything, maybe just adding a dead cat or some foam to the microphones to help with plosives in the wind. But yeah, turned out fantastic.
If you want to make one of your own, you can find the plans at syrplab.com/education. And thanks for watching.
Cheers.